Keanu Reeves had always been a man who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. His philanthropic efforts were quiet and largely unpublicized, but he had been helping the Veteran Motorcycle Club for years. His donations had kept the club afloat during financially tough times, and many of the club's members considered him a quiet hero. Keanu had always believed in the power of community and the bonds formed by shared experiences, particularly among veterans who had seen the darkest sides of life. However, Keanu's planned visit to a prestigious charity gala with his mother took a sudden turn when he received a phone call that drew him to the clubhouse. The call came unexpectedly, and when Keanu arrived at the clubhouse, the air was thick with tension. He had no idea what he was walking into. A group of 3 bikers, members of the club, had caused trouble at a gas station earlier that day. The situation escalated into a chase, and the bikers had harassed not only Keanu but also his elderly mother. As he stepped into the dimly lit clubhouse, he felt the weight of the situation, the unease of the other club members, and the unspoken expectation that something had to be done. This was not just a routine visit, it was a confrontation that would test the strength of the club's values. Keanu's entrance was met with murmurs from the assembled veterans. It was clear that the club's leadership, particularly Derek, the president, intended to address the situation head-on. Keanu could feel the shift in the room as soon as he walked in. The bikers who had harassed him and his mother were at the center of the storm, and all eyes turned toward them. The seriousness of the moment was not lost on Keanu. He had been a part of this brotherhood for years, but today, the club's principles and his own integrity would be put to the test. As he stood in the doorway, Keanu wasn't sure what to expect. Would Derek support him, or would the situation escalate further? He had always trusted Derek, but this was an unprecedented moment. Keanu's calm demeanor remained unshaken as he stepped into the room, ready to address the incident, but also aware of how delicate this moment was. The club was a family, but families sometimes had to deal with hard truths. Keanu's mind wandered back to the many years he had supported the club. His donations had funded critical surgeries for members, helped them regain their footing in civilian life, and even funded recovery programs for those battling PTSD. He had been more than just a silent benefactor. He had been a quiet pillar for the club. And now, this single moment, this confrontation, could change everything. It was a test of how deep the club's values ran and whether they would stand behind one of their own when it truly mattered. The air in the clubhouse was thick with unspoken emotions. Derek, the club president, stood at the front, his jaw clenched in frustration. He knew this was not just about a couple of bikers making a mistake. It was about upholding the integrity and values of the entire club. Keanu's presence here was a reminder of what the club stood for: loyalty, respect, and honor. The violation of these principles by the 3 offenders couldn't go unpunished, and Derek was ready to take action. Keanu could hear the murmurs of the other members around him, but he stayed calm. His heart wasn't racing. Instead, he felt a strange sense of resolve. He had helped these men for years, but it wasn't just about money or donations. It was about something far deeper: respect. These men had fought for their country and had faced unimaginable challenges, but now they were being tested by a situation that threatened the core of their brotherhood. Derek's leadership would be crucial in navigating the next steps. The situation wasn't just about disciplining the offenders, it was about reaffirming the club's values and showing that no one was above the rules. Keanu knew that Derek was a man of integrity, someone who had always led the club with a firm but fair hand. As he glanced around the room, Keanu saw faces he recognized, men who had been with the club for decades. They were all watching this moment unfold, waiting to see what would happen next. Keanu's unexpected visit to the clubhouse had turned into a pivotal moment for the club. What began as a simple, unplanned stop had now evolved into something much bigger. Keanu's presence would not only serve as a reminder of the club's core principles, but it would also test the loyalty and values of the men who had once called each other brothers. This was no longer just a confrontation with a few reckless bikers. It was a test of the club's soul. Keanu knew that the outcome of this confrontation would shape the future of the club. Would the members stand by their principles? Would they let one man's actions threaten the unity they had spent so many years building? As Derek began to speak, Keanu prepared himself for whatever was to come, knowing that this moment would define the club's character for years to come. The confrontation with the offenders. Derek's voice boomed as he addressed the 3 offenders at the center of the room: Crusher, Crow, and Bull. These men had been part of the club for years, but their actions that day had broken one of the club's most sacred rules: respect for others. As Derek demanded an explanation, the three men shifted uncomfortably, their earlier bravado vanishing in the face of the president's wrath. Keanu could see the change in their demeanor. What had started as an act of defiance now seemed like a desperate attempt to save face. Crusher, the largest of the three, tried to defend their actions. "It was just a race," he muttered, his voice lacking the confidence it had carried earlier. But Keanu, standing at the back, wasn't buying it. This wasn't just a harmless race. This was a pattern of behavior that had escalated beyond any reasonable excuse. Keanu's calm recounting of the events, the harassment at the gas station, the chase, and the threats, laid bare the truth of what had happened. There was no way to sugarcoat the situation now. The room grew tense as the bikers' weak explanations fell flat in front of the assembled veterans. It was clear that the club members were not only disappointed but disgusted by what had transpired. These men had violated the trust of the club, and now they would have to answer for it. Derek's eyes flashed with anger, and his voice cut through the silence as he addressed the offenders directly. "Do you know who this man is?" Derek asked, referring to Keanu. The bikers were silent, unsure how to respond. Derek's question was rhetorical, meant to remind them of Keanu's importance to the club and the many sacrifices he had made for its members. Keanu's generosity had saved the club during its darkest hours, and now, the same men who had benefited from that generosity were now at the center of a scandal that threatened the very fabric of their brotherhood. Crusher's earlier defiance had now turned into shame, and Keanu could see the realization dawn on the three men. Derek's voice lowered to a dangerous calm as he continued to speak, his words like a knife slicing through the air. "You harassed a man who's done more for this club than most of you combined. You threatened a man who saved us from financial ruin." His words hung in the air, and Keanu could feel the weight of them. These were not just accusations, they were facts. The bikers were now forced to face the reality of their actions, and it was clear they had no defense. Crusher, the largest and once most confident of the three, mumbled an apology. "We didn't know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the apology seemed hollow, a mere attempt to avoid the inevitable. Derek wasn't swayed. "Ignorance is no excuse," he snapped. "You violated everything this club stands for." The words were sharp, and the finality in Derek's tone made it clear that there would be no forgiveness for this transgression. The rest of the club members stood in silence, their disappointment evident in their expressions. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of betrayal, and Keanu felt the tension in the room. The bikers' excuses were useless in the face of their actions. This wasn't just about a small incident, it was about respect for the people who had supported them and for the club's core values. These men had let their egos cloud their judgment, and now they would pay the price. Keanu watched the scene unfold with a mix of emotions. He was angry, of course, but he was also saddened by the betrayal. He had always viewed the club as a family, and seeing members of that family tear at the fabric of trust was painful. He had been there for them when they needed help, and now they had turned on him in the most disrespectful way possible. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very people he had helped were now the ones who had betrayed him. The room fell into a tense silence as Derek made his decision. The bikers stood there, their heads bowed in shame, as Derek's words echoed in the room. "Hand over your patches," he commanded. The three men slowly complied, their shoulders slumped as they removed the badges of honor that had once symbolized their place in the club. The sound of Velcro tearing seemed to resonate in the room, marking the finality of their expulsion from the Brotherhood. Keanu felt a pang of regret for the three men as they left the clubhouse. He didn't want to see anyone lose their family, but their actions had left him no choice. The bikers' departure was a necessary consequence, a harsh reminder of the club's rules. The message was clear. No one, no matter how long they had been a part of the club, was above the law. Respect for others was non-negotiable. As the men walked out, Keanu knew that the situation had been handled, but the scars of this betrayal would linger for a long time. The reaffirmation of brotherhood and values. After the tension of the confrontation had subsided, the atmosphere in the clubhouse slowly began to shift. The three expelled bikers had left, their heads bowed in defeat, and the weight of their departure was heavy in the air. For a moment, there was silence, an uncomfortable silence, as the club members processed what had just occurred. Derek, the president of the club, was still standing at the front, his posture rigid with authority but softened by a hint of sadness. As the room settled, Derek addressed the remaining members. His voice was calm but filled with an undeniable intensity. "Brothers, today we were reminded of why we do what we do. Why this club exists. We are more than just a group of men who share a love for motorcycles. We are a family. A family that stands by each other in the hardest of times, and a family that holds one another accountable when we go astray." His words resonated deeply within the club, as the members knew exactly what he was referring to. Today's events had shown how fragile their brotherhood could be, but also how vital it was to uphold the values they had built together. Derek continued, reminding the group of the principles that had formed the foundation of their club: honor, respect, and unwavering support for one another. These were not just words. They were a code of conduct that had been ingrained in each of them during their time in the military and had carried over into their civilian lives. The respect they had for each other, the loyalty they shared, was the very thing that had kept them united for so long. But today, some had forgotten that code, and it had almost cost them everything. "Today, we saw how one man's actions could tear at the fabric of what we've built here," Derek said, his voice lowering. "We have worked too hard for too long to let this kind of behavior slide. When you disrespect one of our own, you disrespect all of us." The members around him nodded in agreement, their expressions grim but resolute. This was not a time for leniency or excuses. The club's strength lay in its unity, and that unity could only survive if everyone followed the same rules. Keanu, standing quietly at the back of the room, felt the weight of Derek's words. He had been a silent supporter of the club for so long, but now he understood just how deeply their values ran. Keanu had always believed in the power of community, but hearing these veterans reaffirm their commitment to each other made him realize how important it was to stand by those values, no matter the cost. The club's support had been a lifeline for many of these men, and today, that same support was being tested. The members of the club, who had once looked at Keanu with a mix of gratitude and admiration, now looked at him with something more profound: respect. Derek had made it clear that Keanu's quiet generosity had been pivotal in saving the club during its darkest days. The men now understood the full extent of Keanu's commitment to them, and they recognized that his presence in their community was not just an act of charity, it was a bond of brotherhood that had withstood the test of time. This realization brought a new level of respect to the table. Derek's gaze shifted to Keanu, and he motioned for him to step forward. "This man, Keanu, has been with us for years," Derek said, his voice gaining strength. "He's never asked for anything in return. He's given without hesitation, and he's always been there for us, whether we needed financial support, guidance, or simply a place to belong." The club members stood in solemn agreement, their heads nodding as they acknowledged Keanu's quiet but steadfast role in their lives. Keanu felt a surge of gratitude, not for the praise, but for the genuine recognition of the importance of what he had done. It wasn't just about money, it was about showing up when it mattered most. As Derek continued, he reminded the group of the core values that had made their club different from any other. The foundation of their brotherhood was built on shared experiences and mutual respect, and it was that foundation that had allowed them to support each other through the toughest of times. "The lesson today," Derek said, pausing to make eye contact with every member in the room, "is that we must never forget why we are here. We are a family. We protect each other, we support each other, and we hold each other accountable. When one of us falters, it affects us all." The silence in the room was a collective moment of reflection. The members knew that Derek's words were not just a reminder, they were a call to action. The club could only continue to thrive if each member lived up to the ideals they had sworn to uphold. The meeting ended with a renewed sense of purpose. The tension that had hung in the air earlier had lifted, replaced by a sense of unity and strength. Keanu, who had been a silent observer throughout the exchange, now felt more deeply connected to the club than ever before. He wasn't just a benefactor. He was part of something far greater than himself. This was a family, one bound by shared sacrifices, struggles, and triumphs. And in that moment, Keanu understood that he had found his place among them. Keanu's call to his mother. After the tense moments in the clubhouse, Keanu felt the need to step away for a brief moment of quiet reflection. His decision to stay and support the club had been made, but he needed to inform his mother about the change of plans. His mother, Patricia, had been a steadfast part of his life, always supportive of his charitable work and the causes he believed in. Keanu knew she would understand, but he still felt a pang of guilt for altering their carefully laid plans. Keanu found a quiet corner in the clubhouse, away from the hum of conversations and the clinking of bottles. The walls, adorned with military memorabilia and photographs, seemed to offer a sense of solace as he dialed his mother's number. The wood-paneled walls and the vintage photos of military men and their stories of service provided a stark contrast to the opulence of the charity gala they had planned to attend. It felt like a world apart, yet here he was, making a decision that would shift his entire day. When his mother picked up the phone, Keanu could hear the concern in her voice. "Keanu, is everything okay?" she asked, sensing the change in his tone. Keanu smiled softly, reassuring her, "Everything's fine, Mom. I'm just with Derek and the guys at the clubhouse. We had an unexpected situation come up." Keanu then proceeded to explain the events that had unfolded, the trouble with the three bikers, the confrontation in the clubhouse, and the decision to stay and catch up with the veterans. He was grateful for the opportunity to reconnect with the club and help resolve the issue. Patricia listened patiently, her initial worry giving way to understanding. She knew her son well enough to know that when he made a decision, it was always with purpose and thoughtfulness. "I completely understand," she said warmly. "You stay there and spend time with those brave men. I can handle the gala on my own." Keanu could hear the kindness in her voice. Patricia had always been supportive of his work with the veterans, and she understood the value of these genuine connections far better than anyone else. Keanu, feeling a deep sense of relief, assured his mother that he was safe and would make sure to call her later. "I'll be fine, Mom. It's just, I need to be here today," he explained, knowing she would understand. There was something profoundly grounding about the decision he had made. The gala, with its glitzy lights and high-profile guests, seemed trivial now. What mattered more was the sense of connection and purpose he had found with the veterans at the clubhouse. As he hung up the phone, Keanu felt the guilt that had been gnawing at him dissipate. He knew his mother would be fine at the gala, and he was doing what felt right. The unexpected turn in his plans had led him to exactly where he needed to be, surrounded by men who had served their country, who had seen the worst of life, and who had found a second family in this club. The sense of camaraderie and shared history in the clubhouse made him realize just how important these relationships were. Keanu returned to the main room of the clubhouse, where the conversations had shifted to more light-hearted topics. The veterans were recounting old stories, laughing together, and offering Keanu warm smiles as he rejoined them. He felt an overwhelming sense of peace, knowing he had made the right decision. His presence here today was not just about a charity gala or fulfilling an obligation, it was about connecting with people who had become his family over the years. The sound of clinking glasses and laughter filled the air, and Keanu felt a warmth in his chest. These were the moments that mattered, the moments where real connections were made. The glittering world of charity galas and high society events could wait. Today, Keanu had found something far more valuable, a genuine sense of belonging, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful destinations are the ones we never plan to reach. The club's legacy and the veterans' gratitude. As the afternoon wore on, Keanu settled into the clubhouse, surrounded by the veterans he had quietly supported for so many years. The mood had lightened, the tension from the earlier confrontation dissipating into the air like a passing storm. In its place was a sense of camaraderie that Keanu had not experienced in such an intimate setting before. This was the real impact of his years of giving. These men, some of whom had seen the darkest days of war, had found their way to a better life because of the support he had provided. One by one, the veterans came up to Keanu, eager to shake his hand and thank him for the difference he had made in their lives. Each handshake was firm, sincere, and accompanied by a word of gratitude that struck Keanu deeply. They shared stories with him, recounting the hardships they had faced, their struggles with reintegration into civilian life, and how the club had been their anchor. But what stood out in every story was Keanu's quiet role behind the scenes. He had provided not just financial support, but hope. One older man, a veteran who had been with the club for many years, approached Keanu with a look of deep emotion in his eyes. His face was weathered, and his movements slow, but there was a fire in his gaze. "Mr. Reeves," he began, his voice rough but full of gratitude, "I don't know if you remember, but 5 years ago, your donation helped fund my knee surgery. I was in a bad way then, couldn't work, nearly lost everything. That surgery gave me my life back." The man paused, and Keanu could see the emotion welling up in his eyes. "I've never had the chance to thank you properly. I owe you everything." Keanu, moved by the depth of the man's gratitude, grasped his hand warmly. "I'm just glad I could help," he said, his voice thick with emotion. You fought for this country, and that's worth everything." The veteran's eyes softened, and he nodded, his grip on Keanu's hand firm and appreciative. Keanu realized that his donations, though small to him at the time, had meant the world to these men. For them, it wasn't just about money, it was about the difference that support had made in their lives. It was the lifeline they had needed at their lowest points. This man's story wasn't unique. As more veterans came forward, each shared a personal tale of how the club, and Keanu's quiet generosity, had been pivotal in their recovery. One man spoke of how the club had helped him battle PTSD and find a path back to his family. Another shared how the sense of belonging he found within the club helped him overcome unemployment and rediscover his purpose. These were stories of resilience, of men who had faced the harshest of challenges and emerged stronger because they had each other, and because of the unseen support from people like Keanu. Keanu stood there, listening intently, his heart swelling with pride. This was why he had done what he did. This was the impact he had hoped for all along. It was more than just about being recognized for his generosity, it was about the lives that had been touched, the futures that had been rebuilt. These veterans, many of whom had come from the hardest backgrounds, had found a place to heal and grow, not because of financial donations alone, but because of the community that supported them. The club was a sanctuary, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of service and struggle. Derek, watching the interactions with a smile, approached Keanu with 2 cold beers in hand. He passed one to Keanu, who took it with a nod of thanks. "You know," Derek said with a grin, "I don't think you realize just how much of an impact you've had on these guys' lives. Your support goes far beyond just writing checks. You've given these men hope. You've given them a chance to rebuild their lives." His words echoed the gratitude Keanu had been feeling all along but had never fully acknowledged. Derek was right. Keanu had been a quiet benefactor, working behind the scenes, but the effect of his actions was undeniable. Keanu looked around at the group of veterans, each of them in their own way a testament to the power of second chances. "I'm just glad I could help," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "These men have sacrificed so much, and they deserve all the support we can give them." Derek nodded in agreement, clinking his beer bottle with Keanu's in a quiet toast. The club's legacy was not just in its history, but in the men who had found redemption and renewal within its walls. The afternoon slowly turned into evening, and the energy in the clubhouse shifted again. What had begun as a tense situation had evolved into a celebration of brotherhood, redemption, and the power of community. The veterans were not just members of a club, they were part of a family that had supported each other through the darkest of times. They had shared their struggles, their victories, and now they were sharing their gratitude for the man who had been there for them when they needed it most. Keanu knew, in that moment, that this was the true legacy of the club, and his place within it. Keanu's inner reflection and realization. As the night wore on and the last of the beer bottles were drained, Keanu found himself stepping outside the clubhouse into the cool night air. He needed a moment to himself to reflect on everything that had happened. The day had unfolded in ways he hadn't expected. What had started as a routine visit to reconnect with Derek had turned into a powerful reminder of the impact of his actions, the importance of brotherhood, and the value of giving without expecting anything in return. Standing outside, Keanu looked up at the stars, his thoughts turning inward. He had always known that his support for the club mattered, but hearing the personal stories of the veterans had given him a new understanding of what that support truly meant. It wasn't just about money, donations, or charity events. It was about the human connection, the bond of shared experiences and mutual respect. It was about showing up when it mattered most and being there for people who had given so much of themselves. Keanu had always believed in the importance of community, but now he realized just how vital it was to be part of a community that understood the value of loyalty and respect. These veterans, each with their own scars, physical and emotional, had found a family within the club, and Keanu had played a pivotal role in that. The donations he had made, the time he had spent supporting the club's mission, had helped them rebuild their lives, but it was the relationships that had formed as a result that had truly made the difference. In that quiet moment of reflection, Keanu realized that his work wasn't done. There was still so much to be done, so many more lives to touch, so many more stories to hear. The true power of his generosity wasn't just in the money he had given, it was in the way he had listened, supported, and helped these men find hope when they had none. His contributions had given them a second chance, but it was their strength and resilience that had allowed them to rebuild their lives. Keanu's thoughts then turned to his own life. The gala, the luxury hotels, the glamorous events, it all seemed so distant now. 4 years, he had been entrenched in a world that valued status, wealth, and recognition. But standing there in the darkness, surrounded by the quiet hum of the clubhouse and the sounds of veterans talking and laughing inside, Keanu realized that true fulfillment didn't come from the applause of a room full of strangers. It came from the quiet moments of connection, from knowing that he had made a tangible difference in the lives of people who truly appreciated it. As he returned inside to join the veterans, Keanu felt a deep sense of peace. The day had turned out to be far more meaningful than he could have imagined. It wasn't about the gala he had planned to attend, it was about the people who had become his family through years of support and mutual respect. In the presence of these men, he had found his true calling, not as a philanthropist or a donor, but as a brother. The bonds he had formed here were deeper than anything money could buy, and Keanu knew that he would continue to stand by these men for as long as they needed him. The confrontation and Keanu's role in the club. The confrontation inside the clubhouse, sparked by the behavior of the 3 errant bikers, had set the stage for Keanu's deeper involvement with the club. As Derek had led the charge in dealing with the offenders, Keanu had remained calm, standing at the heart of the gathering with the full weight of the situation upon him. The bikers, who had once exuded an air of cocky bravado, had quickly wilted under Derek's steely gaze and the intense scrutiny of the veterans. Keanu had been a quiet benefactor for years, his donations, his time, his support, all given with little expectation of acknowledgement. But when the bikers harassed him and his mother, it was as if his years of silent contributions had given him a newfound authority among the veterans. The actions of the offenders had crossed a line, not just with him, but with the values that the club had long upheld. Derek's words had cut through the tension like a sharp knife, revealing the significance of Keanu's role in the club. The offenders had been out of line, not only with Keanu, but with the essence of what the club stood for. The 3 men, Crusher, Crow, and Bull, had tried to downplay their actions, offering flimsy excuses for their harassment, but the club wasn't having it. Keanu had calmly recounted the details of the incident, and with every word, the other members' expressions grew darker. It was clear that the club would not tolerate behavior that violated the bonds of brotherhood, the fundamental principles they had fought to uphold. Derek's words, firm and unyielding, had left no room for ambiguity. In the moment that followed, the offenders had been stripped of their patches, their place in the club permanently revoked. The room had gone silent, the only sound being the tearing of Velcro as the patches were removed. For the men who had once been members of the club, this expulsion had been a devastating blow, but it was necessary. As Derek had said, the actions of those men had been a betrayal of everything the club stood for. In that moment, the truth had been laid bare for all to see. The respect, loyalty, and support that defined the club had to come first, even if it meant severing ties with those who failed to honor it. Keanu, though standing apart from the core of the confrontation, had felt the weight of the moment deeply. This wasn't just about the offenders being punished, it was about the club reaffirming its values. It was a declaration that their loyalty to each other, their commitment to doing right by the people who had stood by them, mattered above all else. The expulsion of the 3 bikers had reinforced the importance of trust within the club, something Keanu had come to appreciate on a profound level. It was through this confrontation that Keanu found himself cemented as more than just a donor or a supporter. He was now a respected part of the brotherhood. His role in the club had grown from the periphery to something deeper. The respect of the veterans, the bonds that had been formed, and the shared values were all reinforced through this very public yet necessary act of justice. Keanu had been quietly supporting the club for years, but this moment made him realize that he was more integral to their survival and sense of unity than he had ever understood before. As the confrontation ended, Keanu had been pulled into the fold even further. Derek, though initially angry, had turned to him with warmth and gratitude. His apology for what Keanu had had to endure with the bikers showed a level of respect that transcended their initial relationship. And as Keanu stood there, surrounded by the other veterans, he felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, a feeling that had been missing from his life for far too long. Keanu's decision to stay with the club. As the chaos of the confrontation faded into the background, Keanu was faced with an unexpected decision. The charity gala, which had been the main event on his schedule that evening, seemed suddenly trivial in the face of everything that had transpired. His mother, though she had initially been concerned when Keanu called to explain his change of plans, had understood without hesitation. The gala could wait. What mattered now was the moment he was experiencing with the veterans, a moment of deep personal significance that he could not walk away from. Keanu had always been one to follow through with his commitments, especially to his family. The gala, where he had planned to network with some of the most influential people in the philanthropic world, had once seemed like an important step in his journey. But as he stood in the clubhouse, surrounded by the men who had served their country, their struggles, and their triumphs, he knew that the real work was here with them. He had always believed in the power of giving, but the depth of that belief had been cemented by the bonds he had formed in this very room. The veterans weren't just recipients of his generosity, they were his brothers. They had become an integral part of his life, not as charity cases, but as equals, as men who had stood shoulder to shoulder in the face of adversity. The connection he felt to them now, after everything that had happened, was unlike anything he had experienced before. Keanu's decision to stay was not one made lightly. It wasn't just a spontaneous choice, it was a reflection of the values he had come to hold dear. The camaraderie of the veterans, the shared purpose of rebuilding their lives, was more meaningful to him than any high-profile event could ever be. The fact that his mother had understood his choice was a testament to her own values, and to the way she had raised him. She knew that sometimes, the most important moments in life didn't come wrapped in glittering packages. They came in quiet moments of connection, of shared purpose, and of standing by those who needed you most. So, Keanu put away his phone and turned back to the clubhouse. As he rejoined the veterans, the atmosphere had shifted from one of tension to one of mutual respect and warmth. Derek's offer of a drink and a chance to catch up was more than just an invitation. It was a symbol of the genuine bond that had been rekindled between Keanu and the veterans. It was a bond that had nothing to do with money or status. It had everything to do with mutual respect, loyalty, and the shared desire to make the world a better place for those who had sacrificed so much. The decision to stay in the clubhouse was a moment of clarity for Keanu. It was a turning point in his life, one that would lead him to a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. He wasn't just a philanthropist, he was a brother, a supporter, and a vital part of a family that transcended bloodlines. The reaffirmation of brotherhood and values. As Keanu stood in the clubhouse, surrounded by the men whose lives he had quietly influenced over the years, a sense of peace washed over him. The earlier tension had dissipated, and what remained was the unspoken understanding that the bond shared between these veterans went far beyond the walls of the clubhouse or any external event. They were more than just a group of people brought together by a common cause. They were a family bound by shared experiences, struggles, and triumphs. Derek's speech had cut to the heart of what the club represented. It wasn't just about riding motorcycles or sharing a love for adventure. It was about living up to the ideals of honor, loyalty, and mutual support. Derek had reminded everyone of the core principles that had forged the foundation of the club: respect for others, especially those who supported them, and protection for those who were vulnerable. These were not just rules, they were guiding values that had helped the veterans through their darkest times, and they had been a steady presence in Keanu's life as well. The expulsion of the 3 bikers, though harsh, had been a necessary reminder that these values could not be compromised. As Derek had so clearly stated, their actions were not just a betrayal of Keanu, but a betrayal of everything the club stood for. It was a moment of collective reckoning, where the veterans had reaffirmed their commitment to one another and the ideals that bound them together. Keanu had seen this firsthand, and it had made him realize how much his quiet support over the years had been woven into the very fabric of the club. What Keanu had not anticipated, however, was how deeply he would feel the impact of this reaffirmation. The words spoken in that room resonated within him, echoing through his own life. They spoke not just of the club's values, but of the personal responsibility each individual had to live up to those values every day. For Keanu, this was not just a reaffirmation of the club's principles, it was a call to action in his own life. As the veterans stood together, each man reflecting on the events that had transpired, the room fell into a respectful silence. There was no need for further words. The understanding was clear. They were brothers, and nothing would ever change that. Even though Keanu had not been a formal member of the club, he had always been a part of it, and this moment solidified that connection in ways he had never imagined. The bonds that held the veterans together were unbreakable, and Keanu was now woven into that tapestry. The shift from tension to camaraderie was palpable. The veterans, once heavy with disapproval for the actions of the 3 bikers, now found solace in the reaffirmation of their shared purpose. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from one of judgment to one of solidarity. Keanu, standing among them, felt the warmth of their respect and camaraderie, and he knew that this was where he belonged. This was his family, his tribe, and in that moment, He felt truly connected to the men who had fought not only for their country but for each other. The lasting impact of Keanu's support and the future ahead. As the evening wore on, Keanu found himself immersed in conversation with the veterans, each one eager to share their stories of struggle, survival, and gratitude. One after another, they came forward to thank him for the silent but profound impact his support had had on their lives. One older man, his body marked by the toll of years of service, spoke of how Keanu's donation had funded a much-needed knee surgery that had allowed him to regain his mobility and continue working. Another man, once homeless and struggling with PTSD, shared how the Veterans Club had given him a second chance at life, and how Keanu's generosity had played a pivotal role in that. The more Keanu listened to these stories, the more he realized the true value of his support. It was not just about writing checks or donating to a cause, it was about changing lives, one person at a time. Each story was a testament to the deep bonds that had formed within the club, and each man's journey was a reflection of the power of community and mutual support. Keanu had been an integral part of that community, even if he had never fully understood the extent of his impact until now. Derek had been right when he said that Keanu's support had given these men hope. It wasn't just financial assistance that had made the difference, it was the belief in their potential, the belief that they were worthy of a second chance, that had truly mattered. The veterans had fought for their country, but they had also fought for each other, and Keanu's quiet contributions had helped them continue that fight, even after they had left the service. The night continued with laughter, shared memories, and a growing sense of unity. As Keanu moved from one conversation to another, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the experiences that had led him here. He had come into the clubhouse a silent benefactor, an outsider, but he was leaving as a member of something much larger than himself. The respect he had earned was not just for his financial contributions, but for his willingness to stand by these men in their moments of need. As the evening drew to a close, Keanu felt a renewed sense of purpose. The charity gala, once his primary focus, no longer held the same allure. The real work, he realized, was here with these men, with this club, and with the community they had built together. His journey had taken an unexpected turn, but it had led him to a place where he truly felt at home. The veterans had given him something more valuable than any gala or high-profile event ever could. They had given him a sense of belonging. Looking around the room at the faces of the men he had come to admire and respect, Keanu realized that the journey ahead would not be one of isolated philanthropy, but of true partnership and support. He would continue to help these men, but now it would be as part of their brotherhood, not just as a benefactor from afar. This was the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where the bonds of loyalty, respect, and honor would guide him every step of the way. And so, as the night came to a close, Keanu left the clubhouse with a deep sense of fulfillment. The day's events had been unexpected, but they had solidified his commitment to the club and to the veterans he had helped over the years. He had learned that sometimes the most meaningful journeys were those that took you places you never planned to go. In the company of these men, Keanu had found not just a cause to support, but a family to call his own. The future was uncertain, but with the veterans by his side, he knew he was ready for whatever lay ahead.